Let's get our triangle tool. So we go down to our shapes tool. Let's select the triangle tool and let's hold down shift, click and drag to create a perfectly scaled triangle. Let's get our move tool and move it into place. And I'm going to go use my transform controls to be able to scale it. So I would like to create a duplicate. I'm going to do it the long way this time. I'm going to right click triangle and I'm going to right click and make a duplicate layer. And I created a duplicate layer. I have the move tool selected and I can drag it out. So now what I want to do is I want to be able to rotate this so it's basically flipped around. So I can click on the rotate. It's going to give me a degrees of how many degrees I'm rotating it. So let's say I want to just rotate it right here. And let's say that's not really perfect, is it? I would really love to rotate this perfectly. So let's go back. And I can hold down the shift key before I click and drag or rotate, and it's going to click in these perfect little even numbers all the way down here. So let's make these different colors so that we know kind of which one is which. So I'm here in my appearance panel. I have my layer selected. I'm going to double click blue and make it orange. And go ahead and click on my document to unselect. So there we go. We have two different layers. I can click and move these around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take both of these, and you can also select your layers right here. A trick to select more than one layer is you can click on a layer, hold down the shift key and highlight two layers. Or I have this one selected, I can hold down the shift key, click up here and click, and it'll select more than one. Just kind of a little trick to be able to select more than one layer. So let me select triangle 2. I guess we'll call this blue triangle. And call this red or orange triangle. So I can select one, hold down shift, select 2. I can duplicate these. So I can right click and duplicate layers. It's kind of a long way to do it. That's okay. It made a copy of both. With the move tool selected and these copies selected, I'm going to drag it down. We're going to change it so it's switched around. So the blue triangle is above the orange triangle. It's on top of the layering system. So right now the orange is on top of the blue. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight my blue triangle layer and I'm just going to click and drag and it's going to pop on top. And now it's on the top of the layering system. And we can also drag it back down below. So lots of easy ways to kind of get layers on top of each other. We are back in Adobe Photoshop and we're going to talk about the text tool. So there's a couple different ways to create text. You can create single line text like for headlines, or you can create text blocks. We're going to do both of those with this exercise. So let's do the very basics. Let's select our type tool. Right down here it's going to look like a little T. So we have that selected in our toolbar and we're just going to click once and go ahead and type in lowercase. So lowercase. And we're going to make it a little bit bigger. We're just taking our transform controls in the corner and just making it a little bit bigger. It looks like I have italics on, so that's no big deal. I can go over here to my properties panel. I'm going to go ahead and drag that out. And I'm using Open Sans, which you can find on Google Fonts. So if you Google Fonts, it'll pull up a website where you can download Open Sans. It's a free font that you can use. Or you can use Helvetica, you can use Arial, all these different typefaces. It doesn't really matter. But that's what I'm using here if you wanted to match it perfectly, but don't feel the pressure if you don't feel like going and finding Open Sans on Google Fonts. But I wanted to use a typeface that anybody could download and use without having to purchase any kind of typeface. But I love Open Sans. It's a nice flexible typeface. So let's go ahead and character panel, we can go ahead and change it. Instead of italic, we can do light. So now it's going to match it a little bit better. You can also manually change the size of the typography here. So if we wanted to make it bigger, we can type in 30. This is going to be points, the point system. And we can drag it to make it match. So it looks like it's 30 points in size. So pretty simple enough, just in the character panel, just changing some basic characteristics, just like you would in a Word program as well. So now I'm going to make a copy. This time I'm going to use my little shortcut, and I'm going to hold down Option or Alt and click and drag. So now I can sit here, and if I want to do all caps, I can hold down the Shift key as I type and create all caps. But that's kind of cumbersome. I want to be able to change it to all caps without having to sit there and retype it out again. And so let's say I want to go back in my history. Let's say I did a step and I really want to go back to how I had it before. I want to go back to the lowercase. I can go back to my history panel, which it looks like I don't see it there. I think that's history right there. It's right here in my little drop down menu, but let's say I want to drag it out and see what it looks like. So here is our little history panel. I can go back steps in time. So let's say this is all the exercises or all the activities that we've done. It keeps track of everything we've done, and we can go back in our history panel to go back to a previous state. So I moved it and I set the character style. I did all these things. Let's go back to where we were. So we can click on each one of these and go back to where we were. There we are. So if you ever want to go back in time, you can always go to your history panel and it remembers all the different things and activities that you did. So I'm going to drag that back into my panel for later. Let's zoom in, and here is how we can make it all uppercase very quickly. We're right down here into the type options, and we're going to go ahead and get the double uppercase all cap icon. We're going to go ahead and click on all caps, and it's going to make it all caps for us. And let's type in all caps. And you can switch this off at any time. We can toggle this on and off, and it just makes it a lot easier to do headlines without having to retype everything in all caps yourself. Just type it in and in all caps. Let's do some different other things happening here. So let's duplicate this and let's make this bold. We're going to type in bold, and I'm going to change the font weight, which is really easy because it's right here in our character panel. And you just go down to bold. And this is also the spacing. It's called tracking. It's the spacing between characters. We talked a lot about this in the theory lessons. This is where you would change it, your tracking, and we just set it to default 0, which is the default spacing between characters. If you want to make it tighter, you can do a negative. So let's do like a -50 to do it tighter, or even tighter, we can do a -100. This is really going to make a really compact type. Or you can make it real wide spacing and do a +200. You can manually type in your number. So let's say I want more than 200. You can type in 800, and you could go beyond 200. You're not stuck with just 200. You can manually type in much bigger numbers to get more dramatic spacing. And once again, all this stuff we're going to be doing over and over again, so don't feel like you have to master everything I'm talking about right now. Just do the basic shapes and get comfortable with layers and the shapes and the move tool. So let's do a -100, or let me do a -75. I can take my move tool, click off, and there's our little bold. Looks like I might have done this at a -25. That might be what I did for this, but just kind of tweaking. You don't have to match this perfectly. We're just practicing. So we've already kind of done this next one. Let's type in wide, and we can just make this wide. Let's do 100. Oh, there it is. 400. I have it labeled there for myself. So let's type it in manually, and now we have that matched. So that's great. You just click once and you're able to type, and you create this great kind of headline typography. But let's say I want to create a paragraph like this, and I want to be able to easily change the shape of that paragraph. So let's say I take our type tool, I click once, and let me take all caps off, just going to my type options, doing lowercase, and getting my tracking back to 0. I am going to type right here, and let's say I want to have a line break. I would have to, nothing's going to stop me. I can keep typing over and over, and there's no box for it to go to the next line. So I have to press return or enter and just do it manually, which is fine. If you're going to do a 1-sentence headline, that's okay. But I want to be able to have a bounding box for my type. So let's do that, something a little bit different. So instead of clicking once and just typing stuff, we're just going to do a slight tweak. And we're going to get our type tool. We're going to click once and continue to click. So we're clicking and holding and dragging. That's all we're doing. And now we've been able to create a bounding box for our paragraph. So let's get everything back to normal. And there's kind of a nice spacing and kerning and all that stuff between all of the sentences. So let's say instead of me typing in gobbledygook, I'd like to go ahead and load some default random text. There's a little trick that you can do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to type, and I'm going to do paste lorem ipsum. So lorem ipsum is Latin. It's just like random Latin words, a kind of a random paragraph that you can paste in there. So let's do paste lorem ipsum, and it's going to paste a bunch of dummy text that we can use to play with. So what we did, I've got my move tool. So now look, we created this box. And what's great about this is it automatically does line breaks for me and creates a bounding box. So what I can do is I can select the type tool, have the type tool selected, select our object, and you're going to see these dotted lines. That's going to give you a chance to expand this out, to make it bigger. Let's move our properties panel over. So you can make it longer, you can make it like a short column, and it's absolutely great for being able to work and create all this without having to sit there and manually create line breaks. So we can change the spacing between the lines. Right now it's kind of a default, it looks really nice, but let's say we want to add more spacing or we want to contract it more. So we have our move tool selected. We're going to select our entire box here. I'm going to double click. Anytime you want to edit text in a newer version of Photoshop, you just have to double click any kind of text box and it'll highlight it all. It's kind of nice. So with everything highlighted, I want to go down to my character panel and I want to change, let's say I want to make it bigger, 16 leading. So I have really wide spaces between, or I can make it really tight. We can also change our type size here, so we can make it a little bit smaller. Let's do like an even 6. So lots of different ways, and we'll do a lot of this a little bit later, especially we don't really work with large blocks of copy like this or large blocks of text in Photoshop as much. I use Photoshop mostly for photo editing and putting together some really short social media posts, so I don't really have tons and tons of text I'm working with in Photoshop, but I wanted to let you know it is possible to manage and create paragraph boxes in Photoshop, and we'll do a lot more of that in Adobe Illustrator, and even more we'll work with really large blocks of copy in Adobe InDesign, which is really designed for lots of big long paragraphs. So anytime you want to edit a size, make sure this is the trick. You can select the move tool and you're like, well, I can move it, I can make it bigger, smaller, but to change the actual text container, you got to select the text type tool, and then it'll give you that dotted line. That's kind of tricky. It took me a little bit of time to realize I had to do that. And there is the trick. Just click the move tool. We can deselect, just click somewhere outside on our artboard, and we can go ahead and move on to the next one. Here's another layer challenge I missed. Let's go ahead and create these 3 circles. And we'll do that in the next video.